F the Mormons was a chant that was said 5 times during the 2001 game against Oregon and in successive games. The Mormon Church has its critics and people who feel that it is not going in the right direction. But is constant criticism of the Mormon Church healthy? Hi, I am Kai Van Leuven. I spent over 30 years in the Mormon Church, and this is what I did after leaving.
My name is Di, and I am a pastor at Venture Church in the state of Washington, and I am your friend along for this journey.
Yeah, so we have a really exciting episode today. And Di, we're just going to start right off with the receipts. So this is a college football game. Oregon, the Oregon Ducks. Exactly. Boo, the Oregon Ducks. If you're a Duck fan, this ain't the podcast you want to listen to. We are dogs through and through. But
we still respect you as human beings.
What's that?
We still respect them as human beings.
We respect them as human beings, but
that's about it.
Well, this will show a little bit about Oregon versus BYU. This is the student section with a little bit of a chant.
The Mormons! Fuck the Mormons!
All right, Di. So we have the Oregon Duck fans chanting, and we will edit it to F the Mormons during a football game. We also, the year before, USC fans did the exact same thing, and their university issued an apology for doing an anti-Mormon chant, but it was the same exact phrase that was said. And so there is this tension that exists. Now, Di, can we steelman this argument a little bit and say,
like this is scummy sports chanting that happens all over the world. I have stood in the stands of especially Sounders games and heard the opposing team chant this at the Sounders. And I just think it is so classless. But unfortunately, it becomes hate speech, specifically when you name Mormons and not, what's their mascot again?
Come on, Di, the Cougars. Rise and shout. Come on.
Why the Cougars?
You know, I actually don't know why it's the Cougars. We had before this, before we hit record here, we talked about it being the bees.
Yeah, well, I asked why it wasn't the bees, because the whole state is the beehive state, and there's beehives on all your street signs, not Utah's street signs, and I don't understand why.
Yeah, so it's not my state. I only spent 2 weeks in Utah, and that was at the MTC.
Shout out Utah, beautiful state.
Especially southern, let's be honest here.
It's just beautiful.
Yeah, like hiking and Zion and all that. Okay, so it is not the beehive. Okay. For some reason, I don't know, but Brigham Young said that he wanted the saints, he wanted the Mormons to be like bees, like busy bees, like always working and always being productive. And so it became the beehive state. And if I got that wrong, hey, drop it in the comments below, but I'm pretty sure that that's the history behind the beehive state.
This might be a snarky comment, but I think it's better he chose bees than ants.
Why? What? Oh, because ants are busy as well. Oh, yeah. That's good.
If you were the ant state, that would just be kind of great. Yeah. All right.
I don't
you,
like
as in not you, Kai. You, Utah.
Okay. So I wanted to talk about this in the context of college football. And you know what? I'll even be a little critical of my Huskies. Okay. I'll tell a story of when I went to go see BYU, right? Brigham Young University, the Mormon school, versus the University of Washington.
Go Dogs.
Dogs. Purple Rain. Okay. And I am dressed up as a full-on Husky fan. I have the W shirt. I got a Husky sweatshirt on top of it. I got Husky sweatpants. I got a Husky hat on, and I'm sitting in the stands versus BYU. Okay? You guys got the visual.
Yes.
After the game, I'm talking with my oldest brother, who is a diehard BYU fan. And he says, Kai, I got a question for you. How many times did you hear in the stands effing Mormons, something negative towards the Mormon Church? And I said,
Whoa.
More than a few.
Really?
Yeah.
So classless.
And I'm sitting, and this is my team, right? I am a Husky fan. And I'm sitting there, and it just made me feel gross. Like, I'm a true believing Mormon at the time. Like, I'm hardcore Mormon. This was 5-6 years ago. It's the Chris Peterson era. I am a hardcore Mormon. And it made me just feel so yucky being there in the stands and having just kind of hearing that. Listen, next time you have an HBCU college there, historically black college at your university, I would recommend not chanting anything that is derogatory towards them.
Right.
But for some reason, people feel that they can, I guess, attack people's religious beliefs. And I'm not trying to poke fun. When I went through my faith crisis, I felt a lot of anger, and I didn't know how to direct that anger. I didn't know, like, if all of the relationships are the same. Even though I've left the church, what do those relationships look like outside of it? And I was very angry. I'll be honest with you. When I heard these chants, I was kind of like, shoulder shrug, right? Like, I was very angry with the church at the time. So, you don't really, I don't think you process it the right way. And
that's
so
a really interesting, I feel like they're kind of mashed together. The typical scummy sports chant and animosity towards a religious system you used to believe in that you don't believe in anymore. Like they got kind of mashed together in there.
Yeah, it is like this misguided hatred, this misguided, like, where do you put it? Where do you direct it? I think a lot of ex-Mormons are in that space. Like, what do I do with all these feelings and these experiences and everything else? And so I'm going to tell a story of, I think it's good to give some context first. Okay. So there are my two older brothers and my dad. And my oldest brother, both my older brothers graduated from BYU. I'm the only son that was the black sheep that did not graduate from BYU.
The non-cougar.
The non-cougar. I didn't graduate from college in general, so maybe that's my out. But my oldest brother is fully believing in the church, fully active, 5 kids. He is a hardcore BYU fan. He's on the little chat rooms. He's on the Cougar board, writing, pro BYU stuff. Every year is BYU's year, according to him, right?
Well, they've gotten significantly better in the past few years, so good on them.
Good on them, sure. Then you have my second oldest brother, who's a lot like me. He's kind of a fair weather BYU fan. He likes the connection side of things, kind of like how I do. He likes to connect with my other brother and dad, and hopefully me. And so we watch BYU football together. My dad's a fan because he's Mormon. And so we all like watching BYU. Well, this is the week of the Holy War.
Oh, boy.
Now, this is loaded. You have to have some context.
It is.
The Holy War, Zion versus Babylon. Zion being BYU, and Zion versus being Utah. Yeah.
That's like saying angels versus demons or something.
Well, to some, this is
Okay.
the great church versus
righteous versus unrighteous.
righteous versus unrighteous. Okay.
Okay.
The Holy War. So we have the University of Utah, right? Versus BYU. This is the week leading up to this game. And I'm listening to a talk. So, hey, we have this great graphic. So there's
boy.
the.
Of course, it's an Oregon Duck saying it.
Yeah. So I'm thinking about going and watching this game. It's planned. We're all going to go watch it at my parents' house. We're all going to go watch the BYU versus the University of Utah game. And simultaneously, at the same time, I am listening to the Mormon Stories podcast like on repeat, probably 6, 7, 8 hours a day. I'm listening to this podcast.
Currently?
No.
Oh, okay. This is in the past. Okay.
This is in the past. This is right after I leave the church.
Okay.
I'm listening to this during the week leading up to the Holy War, leading up to BYU versus Utah. Okay. And I'm listening to this specific talk that was given by Jeffery R Holland. Now, I'm pretty sure you don't know who that is.
No.
Jeffery R Holland is
He looks exactly like I would expect him to look.
Really? Okay.
White,
descriptor
older.
Yeah.
Okay.
Older businessman, right? Looking suit. Yeah. So Jeffery R Holland was giving a talk, and this is actually a really interesting talk that he gave. I've listened to this talk about 4 or 5 times, not from a spiritual perspective, but just to see if I missed the point. He's giving this talk to the BYU faculty. And his whole point in the talk was, hey, if you teach at this university, you need to support our church, right?
Okay.
If you teach at this university, you need to support our church. You can say that that is wrong. Okay. You can say that's really dogmatic. That's really, thinking of just an institution. You can think it's a lot of things, but that was the whole point behind his talk was if you teach our university, you need to toe the line with our beliefs. Okay. Fair enough.
Yeah.
The Mormon Stories podcast did a kind of a reaction video to Jeffery R Holland's talk. And in Jeffery R Holland's talk, he says, Elder Holland, can I call him that? Yeah, sure, I'll call him Elder Holland. In his talk, he said that people have to defend the church while still with musket fire. So he talks about when they were building certain temples in the past, that people building temples had to be building the temple with one hand and have a musket ready to fight in the other hand to defend the church.
Do you know where that comes from in the Bible?
I don't. Is this?
That's a ripoff from Nehemiah, the book of Nehemiah.
Mm-hmm. Oh, well,
sword in one hand, rebuilding the wall of Jerusalem with the other.
Okay.
Continue.
Well, he ripped it off from someone else too. That
Okay.
was from the church. So yeah,
There's nothing new under the sun.
Yeah. So he talks about this idea that you need to defend the church if you work at the church's college. You can't be going against the church's ideas. And this was mostly directed towards LGBTQ ideas, right? So having departments within the college that are non-affirming is not okay with him, is really where he was getting at. And I've listened to this talk multiple times. So he's saying everyone in the church or everyone in the college has to support these ideas or stay silent, is really what he's trying to say.
Wait, so the Mormon Church is affirming of LGBTQ?
No.
Okay, so did I misunderstand you? So he's saying that everyone who works at the college has to agree to not affirm LGBTQ.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah. So be against gay marriage, be against,
Okay.
homosexual relationships, transitioning, all of that stuff. Okay. So that was really what the point of this talk was. And I'm sorry, the Mormon Stories podcast totally butchered it. They cut all these pieces up and they said, see, with all of the suicide and all of the terrible things that are happening in our LGBTQ I guess group, how could you talk about musket fire? Like, how could you talk about, and they totally conflated both of these things. But I'm sorry, when you listen to something long enough, it will start to have an effect on you. Like, and so I'm listening to these podcasts. I'm like, yeah, the church sucks. Like, screw the church, right? Which is kind of the whole point of the Mormon Stories podcast, is to agitate people to the point where they continue to consume. I wasn't planning on quoting, I would have put the clip in here, but Marilyn Manson said that people want to scare you into consuming. And so it's a fear, consume, get angry, consume cycle. And I believe that the Mormon Stories podcast is trying to do that. They're trying to get people angry so that they consume more of their content. Not necessarily.
Or they're taking angry people and they're continuing to stoke the fire of anger.
Exactly.
Because probably most of that community is already angry and they're just blowing some fresh wind on it.
Exactly. And they have no problem doing that because they're blowing up. So, so they kind of made this connection that if you are using the imagery of defending with a musket, that you are saying that that you're now inciting violence in this community. Okay. I've listened to the talk 5 times. I never got that out of it. But as I listened to, as I would see it, the Mormon Stories podcast, which is an agitator, as I listened to that, I started to get like super angry. And I have this date set with my brothers and dad to watch the Holy War. So we're going all back. It's all full circle now. Saturday night, I plan on watching this game with my dad and brother, but I'm like still fuming. I've just left the church. My family relationships are different. My church relationships are different. My relationship with God is a lot different. And I'm thinking to myself, dude, screw it. Like, I'm no better than the Oregon Duck fans. I'm not trying to be, but I'm thinking in my head, like, the church sucks. I'm ticked off at it. I'm not going to go watch this game with my brothers and dad. I'm sitting at home. It's Saturday night, late Saturday night. The game starts. I'm still sitting at home. I'm thinking, screw the church. I'm not going to watch this game. Okay. My second oldest brother, who's not active in the church, texts me. He's like, dude, where are you at? Like, the game's already started. Do you want us to hit pause and wait for you to come? I'm like, no, I'll just start watching it with me. And when he texts me, and I told him, no, start watching it, the thought came through my mind, like, dude, what's wrong with you? Like, Kai, why are you being so stupid about this? Like, this is a time for you to connect with your brothers and your dad and watch adults carry around a football. Like, this is not about religion. Right. So I get dressed, put on something, whatever, drive over there, start watching the game. And honestly, it was a fun game to watch. It was fun to connect with my brothers and my dad and just have that moment where we can, be together, cheer for something, whether or not you're trying to be religious about it or not. It was a fun game. Hey, BYU won. So it was 2 ranked teams. BYU won the game, and it was just a really good experience to have with my brothers and my dad. Okay. So let's fast forward to today, because at that point I did not have the perspective that I have now.
Okay.
Today, my oldest brother lives in Idaho. He moved away from Washington and he lives in Idaho now. My second oldest brother moved to Texas. I moved to Hawaii, right? Like
Your poor parents.
my poor parents. But if you think about it, that was the last game we probably are, that last holy war we're going to get to watch together, right? And I almost, because of my anger and because of my like misguided hatred towards the church, I almost decided to sit at home and just be angry and just stew. And I think that's like super sad.
Yeah.
Like, I just think at the end of the day, like it's a really sad for me to think about now that I let those feelings govern how I viewed some really important relationships to me and a really important time for me to connect with close family members and my best friends, because I wanted to hold something against them.
And that is incredibly insightful. And I would say you process that in a relatively quick fashion, maybe, for the anger, grief, brokenness you were experiencing. But a lot of people spend the rest of their life there in that anger, which becomes bitterness and unforgiveness and grows all kinds of nasty fruit in their lives.
Yeah, I think so. And I guess at the end of the day, like this whole podcast is really about people healing, right?
Yeah.
People going from one area to another and healing. And that area can be anger, bitterness, resentfulness, and then healing. And so this is what I wanted to do. I wanted to talk to people about this idea of selfish forgiveness, where you forgive just for yourself.
Wait, define that. What does that mean?
Selfish forgiveness is where you really don't care about the other entity, but you just need to say, hey, I forgive this entity. Like, I hand all of this over. Like, the Mormon Church, I think, was dishonest, was not straightforward with me, concealed all of those things are facts, okay? And but for my own personal health and the mental health of those around me and my own personal health, I need to just forgive. And I just need to say, I need to move on. Selfishly, and this is probably the lowest form of forgiving someone. But selfishly, I just need to move forward with my life and forgive the church. And just
it's a good place to start if that's all you got. I think, I don't know. Are you judging yourself for starting off that way? Are you?
No, I think it was a really healthy step in the right direction.
Yeah.
Like, I think anything is a really healthy step in the right direction. I think that any step that you take forward is an act of faith, whatever that is, right? That could be turning off a negative influence that you have in your life because you know it's not good for you. That's an active step that you're taking. It's faithful.
There's also a lot of power in our words. Our words can tear down or bring life, just completely generally speaking, not even spiritually speaking, but certainly spiritually speaking too. So saying, I love you to somebody, even if your feelings aren't there in that moment, speaks speaks that into the room, the other person and your own ears hear it. So speaking forgiveness, you might not feel it right away, but your feelings will come into alignment with what you're declaring.
Yeah, and I think if you say, hey, I forgive the church for kind of the wrongs that I feel have happened, I think it can start to free you a little bit, and it can start to have you look at your relationships a lot differently. Your relationship. Go ahead, Di.
Sorry, question. Do you think that, because I think this is probably true, generally speaking, psychologically for people, but I'm curious in this specific space that you're experienced in, do you think that a lot of people who have left the Mormon Church are struggling with forgiving the Mormon Church because somehow that makes what was done or what they experienced okay? That says, okay, that was okay that happened to me?
Yeah, so there's this idea of like giving permission to the
Mm.
church to do it to more people. And I think that's a really delicate like that's a really fine line to walk, right? Of, oh, well, yeah, well, now everything's okay with the church, and I feel like it's not that bad or whatever, right? And I also think that's really unfair as well to yourself to say like, no, like there's some real things, some real hurt I've experienced here, and just acknowledging that, but also like I'm not going to let it continue to fester in me.
Yeah.
And like I said in this example, I'm not going to continue to like let it drive a wedge in the relationships I do have that I really value in my life. There is this story in the Bible that made me think of this. You guys, I'm not trying to be super preachy. I really hope that this is an environment where people can go if they're really angry. Okay. Let me say that. But Jesus was asked, what's the greatest commandment? Right? They're trying to trip him up. The Sadducees and Pharisees are trying to trip up Jesus and say, what's the most important commandment that's out there? And he's like, love God and love man, right? I'm summarizing this. This is in Matthew 22. And I think when people leave the church, they are really shaky on God. Okay, let's just be honest. At least I was. A lot of the people I interact with, and they're really shaky on their relationship with man, with their family, with their previous ward members, with other Mormons they come in contact with people from their mission. They're really shaky on these relationships. And I think that everyone, whether you're religious or not, I think that the relationship side with family members, with friends, I think that's one that we can all agree on that shouldn't really be affected by a faith crisis, right? Unless there's some really bad abuse or some really bad, trauma that goes along with that. Not trying to excuse any of that, but I'm just talking about a healthy family relationship, siblings, parents, whatever. I feel that holding a grudge against the church, you can separate that and trying to forgive the church, but still holding on to those really strong family relationships and not letting those two become mixed together.
I can see where, as an outside perspective, I can see where that could be challenging. Let's say, for example, your parents, raised you in the Mormon Church and taught you this is the truth, this is what you're to believe. It would be hard to separate out the anger that you feel at the church from your parents who you feel like also, propagated that belief system. So I guess I want to validate the anger part is not the bad part. Like your emotions are not bad. It's what you do with them that matters. So that ability to acknowledge the anger and acknowledge who or what it's directed at, and then work your way through it. We like to use the word process through the emotion to the point where you can validate or invalidate if it's leading you correctly or incorrectly. So if we talk that out, your parents are most likely doing the best they can to raise you. They are raising you in what they have found to be true for themselves. They are also misguided and, haven't worked their way to what you have found to be the truth. And so you feel angry at them, but then you can work your way through that and recognize that it's not their fault that the church has built itself on deception. And they are also, sort of casualties of it, like I am. Or is that fair?
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's a really good assessment of, and I want to go back to my mindset of after listening to a ton of the Mormon Stories podcast before the Holy War, thing, like you have the tendency to lump it all together and not process it step by step by step, right? Like my parents had the best intentions, and they still have the best intentions, right? Of, hey, we're just trying to, save our children, make sure that they're with us in the celestial kingdom, all of those things, right? Which is what they believe.
Yep.
And I don't think there was any malice in that.
Right.
And so I need to kind of, I needed to assess it at the time. And I just hope that, and I honestly pray for this, people, that there will be a lot of like reconciliation in relationships, because so many people that I've talked to have not been there. They've said, I'm ticked off at the church, I'm angry with my family, and they can't separate this idea that, well, your parents probably don't know these things either. Maybe they do, and they're trying to wrestle with them themselves or shut them out completely. And so I just think there's a lot of room for, grace in these relationships. And
I want to go back to one piece of this story, which is there is validity to the anger. So, if you've been wronged or taken advantage of, anger is a very natural emotion. And so that's also important to work through. So even if it's justified anger, even if it's the church did deceive me and did, harm me, or whatever you want to fill in there, holding on to justified anger also doesn't benefit you or your relationships. Even if you're able to separate out, family and relationships from the church, holding on to anger at the church is also just not going to be beneficial. So you mentioned the Mormon Stories podcast, or I'm sure there are plenty of other things out there that fuel the anger, and maybe they don't intend to benefit from it, and maybe they do, but they benefit by having more listeners or subscribers. But you and I are here to say that's not the life that we hope for people, for our listeners, for people that we care about, and people we don't even know, that they will live a life of anger and keep feeding the anger. Instead, they will learn to forgive and walk away from the anger.
Yeah, definitely. I have a question, Di, and this is where I blindside you. I don't know, in every episode. Is being angry okay? Like, is that an okay feeling for people to have? Or is that like totally against God to be angry?
No, I mean, I think I've already even kind of said that in the last few minutes. I think anger is a natural human reaction. If we're basing this off the Bible, Jesus was also angry. And that can be justifiable anger, like I just mentioned. It's what you do with it that matters. So if anger becomes a license for whatever, sin, lashing out at other people, getting even, vengeance, or bearing a grudge, or speaking ill, or, I don't know, whatever self-destruction things, you bear the fruit of resentment, all those things. The reason that the forgiveness guideline is laid out by the Lord is because anger really only just does harm to us primarily. So the longer we hold the anger, and it just never stays anger. It bears fruit, and that fruit is really sickening to us. It does harm to our mental health, our emotional health, our spiritual health, our relational health, our physical health. And there's all kinds of studies about that. So I don't think anyone can argue that it doesn't do anything healthy if it's held on to. It's a natural feeling. What do you do with it? And there are lots of healthy things to do with anger. We're not counselors. We can direct you. I mean, I'm a spiritual counselor, so I do sit with people in their anger and help them process through it. But to the general masses, I don't think there's a Band-Aid prescription.
Yeah. Well, I wanted to have this discussion today just to put it out there. I mean, I'm probably putting myself out there as maybe not a great example, but I do think that as I just was able to kind of forgive the church and move on, it's been so much better. And that wasn't, hey, I'm driving over to my parents' house to watch this football game, and I forgive the church, and I feel so great. It's like taken me years to just be like, all right, how do I feel about my mission? Okay, I figured that one out. Or how do I feel about my marriage and my, a lot of my family members weren't able to be there, and my in-laws weren't able. Okay, I'm kind of wrestling through that, and I forgive the church for that. It's been issue by issue that I've been able to kind of dial back. How do I feel about church history not really being correct? Okay, well, we can, wrestle with each one of those. It's
ongoing.
It's ongoing, right?
Which is a great point. Really, really important point. There's not a magical prescription, and there's not a magical moment where suddenly all the things you're mad about are gone. Maybe that happens for some people. I do not think that is the regular occurrence.
Yeah, I want to know what that person's secret is.
Something supernatural.
Yeah, that is not the way that I work. So I want to encourage people, forgive because it's going to help you, and even selfishly try to forgive.
Yeah, and forgiveness does not mean that what has been done to you or to others you care about is okay or permissible, and it also doesn't mean you have to remain in relationship with the entity or person or people who have hurt you. It is simply so that there is the inability for all the bad fruit of resentment to grow inside of you.
Beautiful. I want to appreciate. I want to thank the people for listening today. And if you choose to like or subscribe, man, I really flubbed on this on the last episode. If you choose to like or subscribe, it does help us. It helps us reach more people, and so that's why it's important to us. So like, share, subscribe. We would really appreciate it. And write us if you want to anonymously write to us. JesusForMormons@gmail.com. I love getting those messages and writing back to people and doing that. So, yeah. Di, do you have any final comments on this one?
So many, but I'm going to hold them. I'm going to hold them because I just have a lot happening in my head. Forgiveness is a really important topic just for human beings. So do the work.
All right. Love you guys. And until next time.